It started with a whisper. Not the kind you hear out loud, but the kind that curls around the back of your neck when no one's looking. The kind that makes you pause even when everything around you is moving just fine. You ever find yourself doing something and right in the middle of it you ask yourself, how did I even get here? Yeah, this is one of those stories they wanted to watch and we let them. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. And if you would have told me years ago that I'd ever be in a moment like that, where eyes lingered too long, where the air felt too thick, where glances said more than words ever could, I would have laughed. Laughed and shut the door on the thought. But the thing is, when you feel unseen for long enough, when the person who used to look at you like you were the only light in the room starts looking at their phone more than your face, you start to crave something, anything, just to be noticed. Again, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just tired. Tired of folding laundry while my heart stayed wrinkled. Tired of setting dinner plates for someone who barely looked up to say thank you. Tired of sleeping next to a man who felt miles away, even when his body was right beside mine. And then they moved in. The couple next door, Jake and Laya, young, bold, a little too friendly, the kind of people who smile with their whole face and hold eye contact just a second too long. I didn't notice it at first, or maybe I did, but I told myself I didn't because it's easier to pretend you don't see what you're starving for than admit you've been starving at all. It started off innocent, drinks on the patio, a few laughs, a neighborly game night, but then there was this one night. The wine was flowing, the jokes were getting looser, and Laya leaned in close and said, "Sometimes it's more fun just to watch." I remember blinking slowly, half trying to laugh it off and half trying to read between every word she didn't say. I looked at my husband, expecting him to laugh it off too, but he didn't. He just smiled. A slow, crooked smile I hadn't seen in months, and that's when I knew something was shifting. Now, I don't expect you to understand all of this right away. Most people won't. Most people live in the black and white, right or wrong, yes or no, stay or leave. But real life is built in the gray. And that night, that moment was the first time in a long time that I felt like someone really saw me. Not just my body, but my ache, my absence, my slow fade into invisibility. 2 years have passed, and I still replay that night like it's stitched into my skin. Not because I'm proud of what we did, but because I still don't know who I was in that moment. Was I a woman looking to feel alive, or a woman slowly dying in a life that looked perfect from the outside? They wanted to watch, and we let them, and everything changed. So if you've ever found yourself in a moment you couldn't explain, a moment that wasn't planned but couldn't be stopped either, then stay. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because this isn't just a story, it's a confession, and it starts right here. I used to think I had a normal marriage until normal started to feel like loneliness, dressed up in routine. You know the kind. Mornings where the silence over coffee is louder than any fight. Evenings where the TV speaks more words than your husband. Nights where the touch has faded, but the presence remains like a body without a soul. My husband, Mark, was never cruel. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat, at least not in the way people define it. But he stopped seeing me. Not in the romantic sense. I mean, really seeing me, noticing the tired behind my smile, the pause in my laugh, the way I'd linger a second longer in the hallway, just hoping for a touch, a glance, something. He worked. Late. He brought his laptop to bed, and on the rare nights he didn't, he brought his silence instead. I used to dress up just to catch his attention at dinner. Now I barely bothered brushing my hair because what's the point in shining when no one's looking? That's where I was when they moved in. Jake and Laya, a young couple, maybe 10 years younger than us. They moved into the house next door on a bright Sunday morning, all smiles and sunglasses and loud music playing from their car speakers as they unpacked. They were different from the rest of the neighborhood. Not stiff, not formal, not caught up in appearances. They laughed a lot, touched each other often, and they looked at people when they spoke, like they really wanted to hear the answer. The first time we met was over trash bins. Laya waved, full of energy, asking about recycling days. Jake stood behind her, shirtless, sun on his skin, flashing a confident grin like he already knew we'd be friends. At first, it was small things. A quick hello passing by during evening walks, an occasional bottle of wine dropped off just because. Then it became more. They invited us over. Movie nights, card games, laughter that spilled into late hours. Their home was filled with candles, music, soft blankets, mismatched pillows. It didn't look like a magazine spread. It looked lived in. It looked warm, and God, I needed warm. It didn't take long before we were spending more time in their house than ours. Mark seemed lighter around them. He smiled more, even touched my hand sometimes during conversations, as if being around Jake and Laya reminded him I existed. But here's the part one didn't expect. It wasn't Mark who felt like he was waking up. It was me. Jake had a way of looking at me just a second too long. Not inappropriate, just curious, like he saw something under the surface and wasn't afraid to look closer. Laya noticed everything. If I changed my nail color, she'd comment. If I looked tired, she'd ask gently, "Rough day." And sometimes when Mark wasn't in the room, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're too beautiful to look that sad." At first, I thought it was just her way, friendly, bold, unfiltered. But then there were the glances, the touches that lingered. Jake's hand on the small of my back when he walked by me in the kitchen, Laya resting her head on my shoulder during a movie night, the way she'd stroke my arm and say, "You always smell so soft." It was subtle, but not forgettable, and Mark, he never said a word. Either he didn't notice or he did and didn't care. That's what hurt the most, because part of me wanted him to care, to pull me aside, to ask what the hell was going on, to fight for me. But he didn't. He let the invitations continue, let the night stretch longer, let the comfort of Jake and Laya become our new normal. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling guilty for enjoying their company more than his. I told myself it was innocent, just four adults spending time together, laughing, drinking, playing silly games on the floor like teenagers. But I could feel it, that slow slide towards something neither of us had the courage to name. There was a night, I'll never forget it. We were all on their couch, too close, too warm, too many glasses of wine in. Laya was leaning into me. Jake was massaging Mark's shoulders and everyone was laughing, and she whispered low, sultry, like it was meant to melt straight into my skin. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be watched? I laughed nervously, shrugged it off like she was being playful. But her eyes didn't blink. Jake smiled from across the room, and Mark, he didn't say a thing. He just looked down at his drink and smirked. That was the first crack in the glass. The moment I realized we weren't four friends having wine anymore, we were walking towards something else. Something strange, something thrilling, something I wasn't sure I wanted, but couldn't stop thinking about. Jake and Laya were different. Open, intense, curious, and maybe, just maybe, we were too bored, too numb, too broken to notice the red flags waving in plain sight. Or maybe we did notice. Maybe we just didn't care. Because when you've spent so long in a room where no one's looking at you, sometimes it only takes one gaze to burn everything down. It was a Friday evening, the kind of night that should have felt normal easy. But even as we walked across the lawn toward Jake and Laya's place, I felt something was different. The air was thick, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Their house glowed warm through the windows, candles flickering soft. Music playing, the kind of setting that makes you forget time exists. I remember the door opening before we even knocked. Laya stood there in a silk robe that barely covered her thighs, laughing like she'd been waiting for this moment all day. Jake behind her, shirt undone, sleeves rolled casually up, 2 glasses of wine already in his hands. They welcomed us in like we were old lovers, not just neighbors. There was something in their energy that night. Something looser, freer, almost like they were daring us not to notice. We settled into their oversized couch, the cushions swallowing us whole. Laya poured the wine. Jake brought out a tray of olives and dark chocolate. Some combination, she claimed, woke up the senses. I should have known then. This wasn't about the wine. It never was. The conversation started like it always did. Work, annoying neighbors, the latest streaming show, but then Laya curled her legs. Beneath her, sipped her drink slowly, and turned to my husband. "Mark," she said with a smile, "has anyone ever told you your voice is soothing?" Her tone dipped on that last word like it meant something else. I felt a flicker in my chest. Not jealousy, not quite. Something else, something heavier, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Mark chuckled a little flustered. No, not really. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to, because I was already looking at him, watching how he reacted. And more than that, I was watching how he didn't mind. Jake was beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth from his body. He leaned in a bit too far as he reached for a grape, brushing my arm with the back of his hand. I didn't move away. I didn't say a word. And then it happened. Laya looked between all of us, let the silence stretch for a beat too long, then said with a mischievous grin, "You ever wonder what it feel like to just watch?" The room went still for a second, just long enough for me to realize she wasn't joking. "Not really," Mark laughed. A low, polite kind of laugh that people give when they don't know if they should be offended or intrigued. Jake raised an eyebrow, like he was waiting to see which direction the night would tilt. I laughed too loudly, too quickly, the kind of laugh that tries to bury discomfort in noise. But my skin burned, not from shame, but from something else entirely, a kind of heat I hadn't felt in years, the kind of heat that doesn't come from being touched, but from being noticed. And I caught myself wondering what would it be like, not just to be watched, but to be seen. Really seen. It was intoxicating, wrong, twisted, but it felt like breathing after holding it for too long, and when it was over, no one said a word. Laya stood and walked to the door like nothing had happened. Jake followed, nodding politely, that same slow smirk playing on his lips. They left. No promises, no shame, just silence. I sat there, legs trembling, heart thudding in my throat. Mark looked at me, not with judgment, not with regret, just emptiness, as if the act had filled something temporary, but hollowed out something deeper. And me? I stared at the door they had just walked through, feeling every second of what we had just allowed, every beat of what had been crossed. And still, I didn't look away. The next morning, the silence was deafening, not the kind that comforts, the kind that presses in on your chest and makes the air harder to breathe. Mark got out of bed before I did. He didn't say anything, just moved like everything was normal, brushed his teeth, made coffee, checked his emails. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the floor, half expecting the weight of the night before to crash down like a wave. But it didn't. There were no fights, no accusations, no awkward stares, no apologies. We never talked about it. Not once. Like silence would erase it. Like pretending it hadn't happened made it easier to carry, but it didn't. That day, I walked through the house like I was moving through someone else's life. Everything looked the same. The photos on the wall, the laundry, basket full of clothes I hadn't folded, the coffee cup still on the counter from last night. But I didn't feel the same. I felt like a version of myself had been peeled away, exposed, rearranged, redefined. I avoided the windows, avoided looking toward their house, but part of me still listened for footsteps, voices, laughter. When I finally stepped outside later that afternoon just to take out the trash, I saw Laya watering her plants like nothing had happened. She waved just like she always did. Too normal. Too easy. Jake was there too, sitting on their porch reading a book like he hadn't just sat across from us watching. He looked up, gave a lazy nod, then went right back to reading, like the night before had been as routine as brushing teeth. That scared me, because if they could carry on like that, if we could, what did that say about us? What had we become? Later that night, I brought it up in the smallest way I could. I said, "That was intense, wasn't it?" Mark didn't even look up from his laptop. He just said, "Yeah, and that was it." Yeah. No discussion, no processing, no. What does this mean? Just, yeah. Almost like he was open to doing it again, almost like he wanted to. And suddenly I wasn't sure what bothered me more, what we did, or how comfortable he seemed with it. I began to look at him differently, not with blame, but with confusion. Was he ever really the man I thought he was? Or had he just been waiting for someone else to unlock this side of him? Or maybe I was the one who changed. Maybe I'd been waiting for permission to become this version of myself because I started to change. I felt it. Not on the outside, not yet, but inside the way I looked at myself, like I was being edited by their eyes, their approval, their attention, their gaze, and I started to ask myself, who was I really doing it for? Was it for Mark to reignite something that had long since gone cold? Was it for Jake and Laya? To feel wanted, desired, or was it for me? Because for the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not in control exactly, but present, like I could see myself again. In a way I hadn't since before marriage stripped me of mystery, but that feeling came with a cost. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw two women, the one who stood beside her husband with her hand in his, and the one who sat in a candlelit room being watched and liking it, and I didn't know which one was more real, or more dangerous. So I stopped wearing certain things around the house, stopped initiating conversation because I didn't trust what might come out of my mouth. I didn't know how to be casual with Mark anymore, not after what we'd done, not after what we'd allowed. We started sleeping on opposite sides of the bed again, the space between us growing, thick with unspoken questions neither of us wanted to ask. We didn't fight, we didn't cry, we didn't process, we just drifted like two boats slowly floating away from a shared shore. And every night, as I turned out the lights, I wondered, was this the beginning of something new, or the end of everything we used to be? I wanted to feel desired, but now I feel decepted, picked apart by eyes that saw too much and maybe never really saw me at all. And now that the thrill has faded, what's left is this strange aching hollowness, like something sacred was handed over in exchange for a feeling that didn't last long enough. And the part one can't stop thinking about is how much I welcomed it. I wanted to be wanted so desperately, so deeply, and for one night I got what I thought I needed. But at what cost? Because now I look in the mirror and I don't know who's looking back. She's not a stranger. She's just someone I don't quite trust anymore. And I wonder, was this all really about Mark's distance? Or had I already been slipping away long before Jake and Leia moved in? Maybe it's easier to blame the silence in our marriage. Easier to say he drifted first. But what if I'd been hiding too? Behind routines, behind resentment, behind makeup and motherhood and the mask of being fine, what if this need to be seen was something I never gave myself permission to ask for? Jake looked at me in a way Mark hadn't in years. That much is true, but did he really see me or just the version of me I performed for him? And that gaze, God, it still haunts me, because even now, days later, I catch myself searching for it in reflections, in shadows, in every sideways glance through the window, when I know he might be standing there. It's not about love. It never was. It was about validation, about feeling alive, but I can't tell if that makes it better or worse. And Mark, he hasn't brought it up, not once, and that silence, it screams louder than any argument. I don't know what terrifies me more, that he's pretending it didn't happen, or that he's okay that it did. I keep wondering if he agreed that night because a part of him wanted it too, or if he just didn't care enough to stop it, and if it's the second one. What does that say about us? About me? I thought we crossed that line together, but now in the quiet it feels like I crossed it alone, and I can't help but ask, was it betrayal? If we both agreed, or was it something worse? Was it betrayal of self? Because I didn't do this for Mark. Not really. And I didn't do it with him either. He was there. Yes, but it was me. I was trying to reclaim the girl I used to be. The woman I wanted to become again. The one who used to walk into a room and feel like she belonged in her own skin. But all I did was